For our topic in trigonometry, we will have the second week lesson under lesson number 2. And the topic is about angle of rotation, and we will now go to the second type of that, which is the reference angles. So if you will recall, uh, last last time I discussed about the coterminal angles, which is actually the first type of angle of rotation. So again, for the second type, let us now consider the reference angles. And after this lesson, you are expected to define reference angles. Second, find the reference angles in either degrees or in radian measure. So from its definition, when we talk about the reference angle, it is defined as the acute angle between the terminal side and the x-axis. This angle is always positive regardless of where the angle ends, that is, regardless of the location of the terminal side of the angle. The reference angle measures the closest distance of the terminal side to the x-axis. When finding reference angles, it can be helpful to keep in mind that from the Cartesian plane or the rectangular coordinate axis, the positive x-axis is labeled as 0 at the end and 360 degrees. Now, when we talk about the radian measures, the positive x-axis can also be labeled as 0 radians or 2 pi radians, while the positive y-axis is labeled as 90 degrees or pi over 2 radians. And the negative x-axis is labeled as 180 degrees or pi radians. And finally, when it comes to the negative y-axis, it is labeled as 270 degrees or 3 pi over 2 radians. Now, let us consider the next slide for the illustrative examples. Okay, we are asked to determine the quadrant where the terminal side of each of the following angles lies or lie. So I have here 6 items and the given 6 angular measures. So each one of them, let us try to identify the quadrant where the terminal side lies. So for number 1, we have 225 degrees. Now, for the quadrant where the terminal side of this angle lie, it is found in quadrant 3. For number 2, which is 120 degrees, okay, the angle having this measure has its terminal side lies in quadrant 2. For 300 degree angle in number 3, we can find its terminal side lies in quadrant 4. For 3 pi over 4 radian measure, its terminal side lies in quadrant 2. And for number 5, 11 pi over 6, its terminal side lies in quadrant 4. And finally, for an angle whose measure is 4 pi over 3 radians, its terminal side lies in quadrant 3. Okay? So if you don't have any question at this point, let us continue with this presentation and let us proceed to the next slide. Okay, we have now the second set of illustrative examples. So this time, using the angular measures from the previous set of examples, let us find the corresponding reference angles of these given angles. Again, we go back to number 1, whose measure is 225 degrees. So how do we get the reference angle if this is the given measure? Okay, we could sketch the angle whose measure is 225 degrees. So we know that an angle like this, which is greater than 180 degrees, we draw the angle in standard position, wherein the initial side coincides the positive x-axis. Now, for the terminal side, to trace the terminal side of this given angular measure, we need to use the protractor here. Okay? Or we could use a protractor here, and you will find out that the terminal side of this 225 degree angle lies in quadrant 3, as you can see from the drawing. Okay, now how do we get the reference angle? So this is the solution. Okay, so 225 degree angle has its terminal side lie in quadrant 3. Since the given angle, which is 225, is within the range of 180 degrees and is in between 180 degrees and 270 degrees. Now we know that this range of angular measures, within the range of these angular measures, are found in quadrant 3. So to get the reference angle, this is what you're going to do. We take the given angle 225 and subtract this from 180 or 180 degrees, and the result is 45 degrees. So this is actually 180 degrees. Okay, now just to make sure, okay, so let us correct this. So I think this is, that should fix that. Okay. Okay, so for number 1, the reference angle is 45 degrees. So that is 225 degrees, the given measure, minus 180 degrees. And this is the answer. This is our reference angle. Okay. Ayan. Now for number 2, we recall that the given angular measure in number 2 is 120 degrees. So if we want to get its reference angle, we could illustrate or trace the angle whose measure is 180 degrees. So again, consider this Cartesian plane or rectangular coordinate system. And of course, the first side, which is the initial side, is always along the positive x-axis. And to trace the terminal side, we could use a protractor here. And we found out that the terminal side lies in quadrant 2. So if that's the case, 120 degrees is in between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. And again, the range of measure within these two angular measures is found in quadrant 2. Okay, so to compute for the reference angle of 120 degrees, okay, we are going to subtract this given measure from 180 degrees, and you will notice that the answer is 60 degrees. Okay, and 60 degrees is obviously the reference angle we're looking for. Next, for number 3, the given measure is 300 degrees. So if we're going to trace the angle of this measure, you will notice that the terminal side is found in quadrant 4, because 300 is within the range or an angle which is found between 270 degrees and 360 degrees. Okay? So, to compute for the reference angle, okay, we're going to subtract this given angle from 360 degrees. And we found out that the measure is 60 degrees. Okay? So, sa drawing, nasaan yun? This one right here. Okay? So, when we say reference angle, we talk about the acute angle formed by the terminal side with respect to the x-axis. So, ang hahanapin lagi natin yung mas malapit sa terminal side, which is this one, the positive x-axis. Okay? So, this is the reference angle. Okay, so this is the answer. Next, we go to the fourth example, which is 3 pi over 4 radian. And this is the drawing. So obviously, from the drawing, the terminal side is found in quadrant 2. So 3 pi over 2 is between the two angular measures, pi over 2 and pi. So to compute for the reference angle, we are going to subtract 3 pi over 4 from pi. And that will give us pi over 4, which is now the answer. Okay? So this is the reference angle. Next, for the fifth example, 11 pi over 6. Let us draw the angle of that given measure, and you will notice that the terminal side of this angular measure is found in quadrant 4. So 11 pi over 6 is in between 3 pi over 2 and 2 pi. So how do we compute for its reference angle? Yun. Okay. So to compute for the reference angle of given angular measure 11 pi over 6, that is, we subtract the given measure from 2 pi. And the result is pi over 6, which is the answer. Okay, next, for our last example, 4 pi over 3. So this is the drawing, and you will notice that the terminal side of this angle with this measure is found in quadrant 3. Now, how do we compute for the reference angle? That is, okay, we take the given angular measure and subtract it by pi. And the result is pi over 3. Okay, so that is how we compute for the reference angle of any angular measure, with whether it is in degrees or in radians. Now, to summarize what you have just learned from the 6 previous examples, now I have here a table of summary which will serve as your guide to compute for any angular measure, to compute for the reference angle of any angular measure, whether in radians or in degrees. Now, you will notice that if the given angular measure has its terminal side lies in quadrant 1, it means the given angular measure will also be your reference angle. Okay? Now, if the if the given angle is found in quadrant 2, quadrant 3, or quadrant 4, so you consider those formulas. Okay? To compute for such angle or reference angle. Okay? The first formula, okay, you use this if the given measure is in degrees. Now, if the measure is in radians, so this is the formula you're going to use. Same thing with the angle whose terminal side is found in quadrant 3 or quadrant 4. So these are the two formulas. One for the degree measure and the other one is for the radian measure. Okay, next. We have the third set of examples. So what are we going to do? We find the reference angle of the following. Okay, so we have 4 items. Now, how do we compute for the reference angle of these 4 angular measures? So, you will notice that the value are quite large and way too small, which is in terms of negative, particularly in number 3 and number 4. And the number of turns generated to come up with such angle is more than 360 degrees or 2 pi, whether in positive or negative values. Now, how do we compute for the reference angle of each of these examples? So let us consider number 1. Okay, so for our solution, so we consider this step, which is determine the positive coterminal angle by continuously adding or subtracting the given angle by 360 degrees if the given measure is in degrees, or you continuously add or subtract that by 2 pi if the angle is in terms of radians, until such time this angular measure becomes less than 360 degrees or less than 2 pi. Okay, so to start with the solution, let us consider example number 1, having a given measure of 420 degrees. So it is greater than 360 degrees. So what are we going to do? We're going to subtract the given measure by 360 degrees. So what will be the result? It's 60 degrees. Okay, so this is the coterminal, the angle coterminal to 420 degrees. And obviously, its terminal side lies in quadrant 1. Okay, so if that's the case, this coterminal angle will also be considered as the reference angle. Okay, and this is the answer. So again, therefore, or thus, 60 degrees is the reference angle since its terminal side is in quadrant 1. Okay, next, number 2. How about 29 pi over 6? So it's very obvious that this value is more than 2 pi. Okay? So to get its coterminal less than 2 pi, what are we going to do? So we're going to subtract that given measure by 2 pi. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Or you can express 29 pi over 6 in terms of two terms added together to produce the given measure. So that is 4 pi plus 5 pi over 6. So it's very obvious that you're going to subtract this given expression, which is equivalent to this given measure, by 4 pi. Meaning, we subtract the given measure by 2 pi twice. And the result is what? 5 pi over 6, which is the coterminal of this given measure. And this one right here has its terminal side found in quadrant 2. Yun. So if that's the case, what will be the reference angle? So if you could still remember, I have shown you from the previous slide the table of summary, particularly the formula to be used to compute for the reference angle if the terminal side is in quadrant 2. So paano 'yon? Okay. So since nasa quadrant 2 yung coterminal angle, or the angle coterminal to the given angle, so we are going to subtract this from pi. Okay? So it becomes pi minus 5 pi over 6, and that will give you pi over 6, which is your reference angle. Okay? So this is the answer. Next, number 3. So for number 3, we have the negative angular measure, which is negative 11 pi over 3. Now, to get its coterminal less than 2 pi, we simply add the given measure by 2 pi twice. Okay? Yan. Or you could express the given angular measure in terms of this. Okay? Negative 3 pi minus 2 pi over 3. Okay? Wherein if you're going to simplify this, its equivalent is the given measure. So, again, to come up with an angular measure coterminal to this one, so we simply add this angular measure by 2 pi twice. So that will give you 4 pi. And the result will become pi over 3. And where can we find the terminal side of pi over 3? Obviously, that its terminal side is in quadrant 1. So ano ibig sabihin? This angle coterminal to the given angle will also serve as the reference angle. Again, okay, so thus, its reference angle is also pi over 3. Okay? Next, number 4. How about negative 840 degrees? So if we talk about its absolute value, which is 840, obviously it is greater than 360 degrees. So to get its equivalent coterminal angle, which is less than 360, what are we going to do? We are going to continuously add the given measure by 360 degrees. And how many times? 3 times. Okay? Until the corresponding coterminal to negative 840 is less than 360. And what the result is what? 240 degrees. And where can we find the terminal side of this angle, which is the coterminal of this given angle? It's in quadrant 3. Now, to compute for the reference angle, what would be the formula? That is 240 minus 180. And that will give us 60 degrees, which is the coterminal angle. Okay? So kung wala nang tanong, I think I've given you all the examples. And that ends our session. And we'll see you next time.